What's up, football fans and gamblers? This is the Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast NFL edition. Today we are going to be covering a preseason preview here. We've got some NFL draft stuff we're going to cover here, coaching changes and coaches on the hot seat, some major player movement, some current free agents worth noting. We've got some top 5 lists to cover for you, rookie QB watch, and then we're going to finish off with a little topic of can the Chiefs repeat. We're going to jump right into this. Typically, these shows are going to cover our weekly bets, and they'll be a little bit more gambling focused. But as of right now, with us still being in the preseason, we just wanted to kick off this episode with some fun stuff that's been going on in the off season, and just kind of get acclimated here. So, without further ado, again, my name is Reese, and with me, as always, is my partner in crime, Mr. Jacob Workman. Workman, how's it going, man?
It's pretty good. Very excited. We are 2 days away. Actually, tonight Hard Knocks starts if you're watching this on Tuesday. And then Thursday, preseason games going. It does actually sound like we're going to get some starters this year in the preseason with a lot of new offenses. So we actually will have at least a quarter of good football, if not a half. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, any football is good football right now. I'm a big baseball fan, so this isn't too difficult of a off season right now for me. But I am definitely ready to get football back on TV. So. Let's kick things off here. So taking a look at the NFL draft, we want to talk through just best first round pick, worst first round pick. So, for me, best first round pick, it's kind of hard to argue that this is not Bryce Young. Carolina made a really aggressive move by trading 2 firsts and 2 seconds and DJ Moore to the Bears to get their number 1 pick. They've been going through a quarterback carousel for quite some time. They used this to draft Bryce Young and, couple that with, Frank Reich now at the helm. I think that this could definitely be the best first round pick when it's all said and done. Now, that said, another pick that I do want to mention is Jalen Carter going to Philly at 9. He was arguably the second ranked player in the draft. I have no damn idea how the hell he fell all the way to 9, but Philly waited patiently and their patience paid off. A lot of people, like I said, had him ranked as the second player in the draft. He could very easily end up being the best player to come out of this draft when everything is all said and done and these guys are hanging up their cleats. So Philly scooping him up at 9 was one hell of a pick. Who do you have as the best first round?
Yeah, I went with the Eagles. I had Jalen Carter and I actually put 2. I know Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith.
Nolan Smith, yeah.
Both of those guys are absolutely ridiculous. And the fact that the best team in the NFC got both of them, I mean, it's almost like, how does this happen? It's like a Madden thing. Like, that should have never happened. But, I agree. Both of those guys are going to be absolutely incredible on that defense.
For sure. It's hard to argue that, and it's scary, especially as a Cowboys fan. It's going to be a rough year to play Philly, for sure. All right, let's move into the worst first-round pick. So I've got 3 here. It's hard not to pick Anthony Richardson to the Colts at 4. I know they needed a quarterback. I know Richardson's an athletic freak. He's like 6'4", 240. He runs a 4.3 40. But this kid is a project. And for them to do what they did to pick him at the 4 spot is a gigantic reach. He had a 53.8% completion percentage, 9 picks, 17 touchdowns, only 1 year as a starter. He really struggles with touch passes and footwork. It could work out, but if they wanted to draft a quarterback that was a little bit more solidified, Will Levis was sitting there. I don't know if he's better or worse than Levis, but that was a hell of a reach at 4, regardless of the fact that I know they needed a quarterback. They had some serviceable guys out there, Teddy Bridgewater being one of them, who just signed with the Lions. They had some alternative options than to go all in with Anthony Richardson. So we'll see how that plays out, but that was the number 1 guy I have here. 2 other names I'll quickly note. Will McDonald going to the Jets at 15, I think was a bit of a head scratcher. They had an opportunity to get a top 3 tackle with Broderick Jones sitting there, which would have been helpful for Aaron Rodgers. They dropped down from 13 to 15, and then the Steelers jumped ahead of them and took Broderick Jones. So I don't know if that was something that they were thinking about or not, but I think they kind of got screwed there. I don't know what the situation was with Will McDonald. And then the last thing that I'll mention here is Washington selecting Emmanuel Forbes. That was a big question mark for me because Christian Gonzalez is a freak, and he was in the top 10 of a lot of big boards that I saw. So for him sitting there when Washington came up and for them to pick Emmanuel Forbes was a bit surprising to me. So Anthony Richardson is really my worst first-round pick, and we'll see how that plays out. But I do have Will McDonald and Emmanuel Forbes here as 2 big question marks.
Yeah, the only thing I would say with Anthony Richardson is there needs to be some excitement within that program. I mean, as I'm a Florida State fan, I've seen Anthony Richardson. I do not like him. He's got a good arm and he's fun to watch. Like he's going to be fun to watch. So at least there's that aspect of it in a division that is kind of questionable. So there will be some entertainment value at least per se. But I do agree that there were better options there for number 4. My worst first-round pick that I put, and this isn't on the player. I actually really like this player. I picked Jordan Addison, wide receiver for the Vikings, just because he wasn't necessary. That Jordan Addison is a great receiver. They don't need him. Like, they need defense. It doesn't matter who's on their offense. They already have one of the best receivers in the NFL. Maybe try to improve your defense a little bit when you've got the Packers and the Lions in your division. I mean, those teams can score at will. The Vikings, to me, I feel like that was a god-awful pick just because last year, you go back to last year, they were like the number 1 team in one-possession games. I think they even were outscored, if I remember right. Like, they finished the season being outscored, and then they do this. Like, I don't know. It just is a very shocking pick to me for a team that struggles on defense.
For sure. Moving into some sleepers and steals of the draft, I've got 4 names here. We already talked about 2 of them. Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith at 9 and 30 for the Eagles. Unbelievable. Christian Gonzalez being available to the Patriots at 17. Again, we just mentioned him being drafted shortly after Emmanuel Forbes. That was a steal of a pick for the Patriots, and I'm sure Bill Belichick was salivating when he saw Christian Gonzalez fall on that board. Last thing I'll mention here is Brian Branch going to the Lions at 45. I know you'll appreciate that as a Lions fan, but I thought that was a potential sleeper steal there at a 45 spot because I thought there was real potential for him to go in the first round.
Yep, he was definitely. I had 4 guys listed also, and he was one of them. He more than likely is going to be a day 1 starter and heavily contribute. All the reports out of camp is he's just been absolutely electric. To throw in with the Lions also for a sleeper pick, second round pick, tight end Sam Laporta. I mean, this dude's going to come in day 1, be a starting tight end, and he's going to get a lot of looks with Jameson Williams out for 6 games. So Laporta rookie of the year numbers, like I think that might be a decent bet to throw out there. To keep with another sleeper, another tight end, I actually went Darnell Washington at Pitt. He's gigantic. And again, another guy, Kenny Pickett. I think it'll be a weapon used in the red zone, good touchdown threat. The only other guy I had on here as a steal of the draft, just because he did fall to the 3rd round, and I absolutely loved him at Tennessee, was wide receiver Jalen Hyatt. Going in there, the Giants do need receivers, and so far what I've seen in camp is he's been in there with the ones. He's been looking good, so that's another deep threat that I feel like is a good steal.
Very good. All right, let's move into some coaching changes. So I focused this list primarily just on head coaches. So breaking this up into the NFC and AFC, we've got Jonathan Gannon. He's the new coach there at Arizona. Philly product. He spent the last 2 years at Philadelphia as their DC. He's walking into possibly the worst situation in the NFL in Arizona. Kyler Murray is out. Ertz is coming off an ACL. D-Hop's gone. Right now, James Conner is the highlight of that offense, if that tells you anything. Defense is in a little bit better shape, but overall, this team is not looking great, and it's going to be a miracle for Gannon to come away with more than 3 to 4 wins this year, and that may be generous. We've got Frank Reich in Carolina coming off into a fresh start with the rookie QB. He's got a tremendous amount of buzz around him. It's hard to put too much blame on him for what happened in Indianapolis. Between losing luck and then trying to do a successful run on offense with a middle-of-the-road quarterback in Jacoby Brissett, aged and very rusty Phillip Rivers, terrifying play of Carson Wentz, which if you ever listen to Pat McAfee's show, you'll know that it was terrifying for Colts fans to watch him every single play. And then you've got a rapidly declined Matt Ryan. So with those QBs over the first 5 years, he still managed to keep the Colts in the top half of the league in scoring until this past year. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with some of those weapons out in Carolina. And that's what we've got for NFC. AFC wise, we've got D'Amico Ryans out of Houston. He played linebacker for Houston from 2006 to 2011, won Defensive Rookie of the Year. He spent the last 2 years as a DC out for the 49ers, and he's getting his first head coaching job out in Houston, playing with a rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud. We've got Shane Steichen out in Indianapolis. I think I'm saying that right. He's another Philly product, 2 years in Philly. Eagles ranked in the bottom 8 in the league in passer rating, but they were top 4 in rushing yards per game. And he's inheriting a strong rookie quarterback, a running quarterback, I should say, and albeit currently a top 5 to 7 running back, although that sounds like that's probably not going to be around too much longer because Jonathan Taylor is not happy and Jim Irsay can't keep his mouth shut. So that'll be another topic for another day. And then we got Sean Payton. So we all know his pedigree. Saints coach for 15 years. He won a Super Bowl with Drew Brees, 2006 Coach of the Year, returning to coaching after a hiatus, sitting in front of TV cameras for a little bit. Last year, the Broncos were 30th in defense adjusted value over average, last in the NFL in points per game, and 26th in drive success rate. So they can only go up from here. The big question for me, for Sean Payton, and I'll pass this back off to you, Workman, is can he implement a similar offensive blueprint with a backsliding Russell Wilson and an uber talented but coming off an ACL running back stud in Javonte Williams?
Yeah, the problem with me here is that division is so good. Like, I don't know. I think Sean Payton can come in and make Denver good again, but can they come in and contend with the Chiefs immediately? I don't think so.
No,
I do think they could end up squeezing in as a playoff team, though. Russell Wilson's supposed to be in better shape. I mean, he looks way better than what he looked like last year.
Yeah.
Peyton's always been an offensive genius. And really, I mean, the defenses in that division, I mean, shootouts are shootouts. That's what they're going to be in. Denver's defense is probably the best defense in that division, so they do have the leg up there. Schedule-wise, I'm not too sure. I haven't looked at it, but I don't know. I do think Denver can return a little bit. I don't think they're division capable yet, but I do think they can make the playoffs as a wild card. And then just to throw a couple coordinators in, Bill O'Brien going back to New England for Mac Jones, that is enormous. Matt Patricia never should have been calling plays. He honestly shouldn't even
be in the NFL.
I absolutely hate that guy. And my biggest coordinator move was Vic Fangio going to Miami. It absolutely sucks. Jalen Ramsey's hurt. But the change there with the way that the offense goes in Miami, I think they're one of the surprise teams. I know we've discussed this a little bit before, but Miami could be the team that shocks the AFC this year.
Oh yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through and pick division winners. You and I have had this conversation already, and I would not be surprised if Miami stays healthy if they don't end up at the top of that division, and that's a hell of a difficult division to be on top of. So we'll see how all that plays out. With all these head coaches, defensive coordinators, outside of say Sean Payton, who seems like the obvious choice, who do you think is going to have the biggest impact on the team that they end up on?
Honestly, I think Steichen. I think the way that obviously we have the Jonathan Taylor question, but the way that Anthony Richardson plays, I think fits right into Steichen. I mean, just look at what Philly's done the last few years with Jalen Hurts. I mean, Anthony Richardson is a guy that can keep linebackers in place, and that's huge. Now, what does the defense look like? We'll see from there. But offensively, I think Steichen is a huge change for the Colts. And like we just said a few minutes ago, that division's not that great. So it's not going to take a whole lot of change to be competitive outside of Jacksonville.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. All right, let's move into coaches on the hot seat. How about you take lead on this one and let us know who you've got on the list?
So I came up with 5. I think the obvious one's Todd Bowles in Tampa. Ever since Bruce left, it's been kind of a disaster there. Coordinators changing, losing everything. I mean, they do still have Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So, they do have some of the better receivers in the NFL. The problem is who plays quarterback. Is it Baker? Is it Kyle Trask? If you thought Richardson was bad at Florida, Kyle Trask was just as bad. So it's another interesting move there. Baker had a little bit of success with the Rams last year. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with there. Josh McDaniels in LA or in Vegas. I think this will be his last attempt for success. Josh Jacobs, Devontae Adams. They got rid of Carr. It's going to be Jimmy G now, so we'll see what happens there. They're familiar with each other from New England. Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. I think it's just one of those, you've had your chance. Let's see success. They have the highest paid player in the NFL at quarterback, so I think this is the last season for him. Who am I? Mike McCarthy in Dallas. I think this is his make or break year also. I think there's some names out there that Jerry would love to bring in if Mike doesn't get it done. And I think Mike even knew this was probably his last call. That's why Kellen got the boot, and he's doing the play calling. So if you're going to go out, you go out on your own calls. And then one last one, just because this team's had on paper, this team's been favored almost for the last 3 years. The Chargers, Brandon Staley.
Yep.
2 years ago, some of the most questionable. It literally was like a 6-year-old playing Madden sometimes on what he was going to do on fourth down or special team situations. Last year, he kind of dialed that down a little bit, but I think this will be the year for him. See what he can do with Herbert and the whole loaded off. I mean, I think their defense is great too. Just one of those. If not this year, I think you're probably done.
Yeah, I agree with you. So I've got there's a lot of names that are overlapping here. I do have Todd Bowles, Josh McDaniels, and Kevin Stefanski. I've got down as honorable mentions. I do have my top of my list was Mike McCarthy as a Cowboys fan. We're coming off to 2 consecutive 12-win seasons, but 1 and 2 in the playoffs under McCarthy, which has been the curse since the mid-90s. Going further back into his career, I think he's only 6-8 since 2011 in the playoffs, so he doesn't have a great track record. He's now parted ways with Kellen Moore. He's made himself the play caller, so now he's stepped into that role completely. Jerry does have a lot of coaches out there that he's potentially looking at, but he also has somebody else in the booth in Dan Quinn that's consistently getting head coaching buzz. So I think that between Jerry always looking for the next best thing and Dan Quinn sitting on the sidelines and the potential for him to walk away to another team, McCarthy's going to have to do something major this year to keep his job. Brandon Staley was my second one. I agree with you on that. Replacing Joe Lombardi with Kellen Moore should make a decent difference. Staley is a young coach, but in order to take the pressure off of him, he's going to have to win a playoff game. They did not play well in the second half last year. I know they've had some health issues. Blowing that 27-point lead against Jacksonville in the playoffs last year did not do him any favors, so he can't have a repeat of that, or he's probably going to be shown the door. I had Todd Bowles here. We've covered that enough. His overall coaching record's not impressive. I think it's like 34-50 or something like that. The Bucs still had a decently solid roster last year, despite Brady showing some decline. And although they made the playoffs with a losing record, they got ousted in the first round. So dealing with Baker, Kyle Trask there, things are not sitting well for Bowles. Let me say this. A couple of the other honorable mention names I've got Dennis Allen in New Orleans, Matt Eberflus in Chicago, and Ron Rivera in Washington as 3 other coaches just to keep an eye on. But one name that I wanted to talk about that I don't necessarily think he may get fired, but he may be on his last ride is Bill Belichick. It's crazy to think about, but the fact that Bill's getting up there in age, New England's made the playoffs twice in the last 4 years, and they don't have a win to show for it. They haven't won the AFC East since Brady left. I'm not sure if it happens. I definitely don't think it'll be an outright firing. If it does happen, it'll probably be a mutual decision to part ways. But I think it's definitely possible that if New England does not play well and they're not in any easy division to play in, I don't think Belichick's going to get outright fired, but I can see him potentially hanging it up. I know he's going after the most wins record, right? How close is he?
He's close, but it's 2 seasons at least. So
so maybe this gets pushed. Yeah, so maybe this gets pushed to next year, so he gets that record and then walks away. It's just a name that I think is interesting to look at because, again, they've not been playing well since Brady left, and I know him and Kraft occasionally butt heads. I can't stress enough. I don't think it'll be a firing. If anything, it'll be, even if it is a firing, they're going to announce it as a mutual decision to part ways.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
Definitely somebody to keep an eye on. All right. Let's jump into some player movement. So I've got a few guys here to list. First and foremost, it's the obvious one, right? Aaron Rodgers to the Jets. How do you not start off there?
Yep.
They land one of the most electrifying QBs the NFL seen in the last 20 years. At his age, you can really consider him a rental, kind of on par with how Brady was with the Bucs. But it's worth it because he's an immeasurable upgrade compared to what they've been dealing with for I don't know how many years. So Rodgers got some solid weapons around him in this offense. A lot of these guys are young. It's going to be really fun to see how they can do in that uber competitive AFC East. DJ Moore to the Bears, another big move. They desperately needed a number 1 for Fields, and they got it in DJ Moore. He's only 26. I think he's locked in through contract through 2025, so they'll have him for at least a couple years. And even sweeten that deal further is that he brought 2 firsts and 2 seconds with him. Miles Sanders to Carolina. I think that's going to take a lot of pressure off of Bryce Young. To have him in the backfield, if he could stay healthy, him and Chuba Hubbard, I think, is still on Carolina. So having a solid running game there, I think will take some of the pressure off of Bryce. So definitely worth noting. Orlando Brown to the Bengals is a huge upgrade for Joe Burrow's blind side. Unfortunately, it looks like Burrow might be out for a little bit. I don't know how long that's going to be, but definitely an upgrade. He went from one AFC contender to another. Big Jalen Ramsey going to Miami. Unfortunately, it looks like he's going to be missing a few weeks. He was pricey, landing. I think he was top 5 money through 2024. But considering the cost is a third rounder and a backup tight end, it was well worth it for them to make that move. Once he returns, that's going to be one of the most dominant 2-1 punches in defensive backlands for the NFL between him and Xavier Howard. And then 2 other guys I have quickly here. Darren Waller going to the Giants. He's a solid grab for a mid-third round pick. Can be considered a top 5 tight end. So I think that he can go in there and make a difference. Then obviously D-Hop going to the Titans. I was a little surprised he landed in Tennessee, honestly. I thought that, it was a potential for him to either go to Kansas City or another contender. But the Titans immediately improved their wide receiver 1 spot, and now they have a decent 1-2 punch with D-Hop and Treylon Burks, and they've got Derrick Henry still in the backfield. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out in Nashville.
Yeah, you named pretty much everyone I had. The only name I had that you didn't mention was Derek Carr going from the Raiders to the Saints. Just because, like we discussed earlier, that division's kind of weak. Derek Carr is a huge improvement, and I love the weapons the Saints have. So I feel like that is the only really other major movement, especially with it being a quarterback in a weak division. For
sure. So speaking of player movement, we do have some free agents that are still sitting out there that are waiting to be signed. Most notably Dalvin Cook. I'll be interested to see where he ends up, and would like to hear your opinion on that. Some of the other guys that I have listed here, Kareem Hunt, Big Lenny, Leonard Fournette's still out there. Jadeveon Clowney still unsigned, as far as I know. Isaiah Rodgers and Ronald Darby, who are 2 decent cornerbacks, are still out there. And then I've got Zeke Elliott and Jarvis Landry as 2 more names, just to mention, that are currently still sitting in free agency. I don't know if you have anybody else to mention, but at a minimum, I'd love to hear where you think Dalvin's going to end up.
Yeah, those I just put 4 guys that I thought were really important. It was Dalvin, Zeke, Jadeveon Clowney, and Kareem Hunt. Dalvin, there's talk Patriots exist. To me, it's still Dolphins or Jets. I think it. I don't know. It's such a weird thing when it comes to him because you can tell he's just holding out. I think we're probably about 2 weeks away. I think he'll probably sign that the 3rd week of preseason. I guess potentially even next week if there's a big injury or something. One thing of note that I don't know if you listened to Pat McAfee today at all, but he actually, with the Jonathan Taylor situation and him being on a rookie deal still, he's not really owed that much money. And he's like, why not throw that money at Dalvin and come in? Dalvin actually wants the ball. Dalvin would be perfect in that offense with the way they're going to run it. Now, do I think it's going to happen? Probably not, because I think Dalvin wants to go to a contender, which is where I kind of eliminate the Patriots also, because I don't think they're a contender. That's Dolphins and Jets. He's been at Jets practice already. I think those are the 2. It just kind of surprised me he was at the Jets and they didn't get a deal done, though. Like, that's kind of the... I'm hoping Hard Knocks shows a little bit of that, just because I'd kind of like to see how that went. But if I'm predicting, I'm saying he lands in Miami, in his hometown, plays for the Dolphins. Kareem Hunt was the other than Zeke. Kareem Hunt was a big one. He did visit with the Saints today. He did leave without a deal, and he is rumored to be going to Indianapolis next. So maybe that's their plan instead of Jonathan Taylor is Kareem Hunt. So that's just something to keep note of. See if there's a deal done in Indy in the next couple days.
Yeah.
Where are you looking for Zeke?
I don't know, man. To be honest with you, there's a lot of buzz that because we've got the issue with damn, my mind's going blank on the running back we've got that's just got a suspension, but the Cowboys are going to be without Ronald Jones for a couple games, and I wouldn't hate. I mean, listen, Zeke is not the Zeke of 3, 4, 5 years ago. I'm a big Zeke fan. I like Zeke. I've liked him since he was at Ohio State. He's done very well. He's been a great leader in the locker room. I think he is serviceable in certain situations. I think it was difficult for him to step back and realize that he was not the number one guy anymore. Tony Pollard was the number one guy. He's been the number one guy for the past year and a half. And I don't see him getting that many touches a game, but I think that inside the 30 and especially goal line situations, Zeke is more than serviceable. And I think that he can definitely be a spellback for Tony Pollard. So if he comes back to Dallas, I'd love it. That said, there's a couple different teams out there. I honestly think the Jets might be a decent pick if they don't end up picking up Dalvin. I think one of the reasons why Dalvin maybe didn't sign there is because they've got a pretty crowded running back room right now. I mean, Breece Hall, his number got called last year, he performed really well. Michael Carter shows some flashes. Bam Knight has shown some flashes. There's a opportunity there in New York to play running back, but I think Dalvin may be looking at that and thinking, if I have a couple rough games, and then Breece Hall steps in and he busts out with 250-yard games out of nowhere, what's that going to do for me? They're going to want to go with the hot hand, which is what it seems like they've been doing the past couple of years. So I think that may be part of his concern there. But yeah, I think seeing Zeke in one of those two locations outside of Dallas would be either the Jets or potentially playing a kind of a goal line situation in Miami. I think he'd have a lot of fun playing with Josh McDaniels. So that's kind of where I'm thinking as far as Zeke goes. But I would not be upset at all if he ended up back in a Cowboys uniform. I think, frankly, we've got Deuce Vaughn and what could be considered a relatively crowded running back room, but I still think, even from a leadership standpoint, he would be worthwhile to bring back in and get a couple goal line touches a game.
Yeah, I agree with that. The only other team I could see Zeke potential, and it's a team I threw out with Dalvin, was the Patriots.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he could play that. He could play that similar bruiser back role, for New England. And they definitely play running back by committee. And I think that's kind of what Zeke needs, because he's not going to be able to run the ball 20, 25 times a game and hold up throughout the entire season. So it'll be interesting to see where chips start falling. I think things are going to the dominoes are going to start falling here very, very quickly as we approach these next 2 weeks. So,
yep.
All right. Let's move into some top 5 lists. So we've got top 5 lists for quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and defensive players. I'll go ahead and preface that I do not have these in a specific order. I just have my top 5 guys. That said, they're mostly, I think, in good order. Top 5 quarterbacks, and we'll just go through this one by one, where I'll go through my top 5 and then hand it off to you. We're probably going to be in line for most of these. Quarterback, I've got Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. Those are my top 5 for this year.
Yeah, I took Hurts out. I have Mahomes, Burrow, Rodgers, Allen, and Lamar Jackson.
Okay.
Hurts 6 though. I mean, there's no question.
Yeah, and again, like I said, that's not in any particular order. I just have my top 5 guys. I can definitely see Jalen Hurts being swapped out there. Right now, I think Lamar Jackson would probably be my 6th, and Rodgers would be my 7th. So. Running back, I've got Josh Jacobs, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, Christian McCaffrey.
That was pretty similar. So I had McCaffrey, Chubb, Henry, Saquon Barkley, just because I last year he came back. I feel like I think he's going to have a huge year. And though he's not on a team, I'm still putting Dalvin at 5. When he's healthy, he's unbelievable. Now he's on the later half, yes, because he's had injury issues. But for this year, I would still say I'd put him in the top 5. I'd put him at 5.
Okay, that's fair. No arguments there. Wide receiver, I've got Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Stephon Diggs, A.J. Brown.
Wow. No Jamar Chase.
Listen, Jamar Chase, the wide receiver part is the most difficult part for me.
Right.
It's hard. Justin Jefferson, I would say, is a clear-cut number 1 to me. But everywhere else, that 2 through 7, I think there's a lot of shuffling that can go on there. I mean, Jamar Chase could end up that list, and I could replace him with A.J. Brown. I could replace him with Stephon Diggs.
You're definitely going to question one of mine. So I have I have Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Okay. That's a little bit of a homer pick if that's not clear cut. But
I mean, look at his stat. He's been unbelievable, and with the weapons that they're forming around him this year, I think he's gonna have a great year.
Wait, so run that five back for me one more time.
Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Okay. All right. So we've got a couple differences there. You've got Diggs out and AJ Brown out. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Let's move into to tight ends here. Clear cut number one, Travis Kelce. It's not even close. Like the gap between first and second tight end in this league is ridiculous. I've got George Kittle, Mark Andrews, Darren Waller, and TJ Hawkinson as my top 5 tight ends.
Yeah, pretty similar. I just flipped one. So I had Kelce, Kittle, Waller, Dallas Goedert, and Mark Andrews.
Okay. All right. And then defensive players. So this is where it's going to get interesting because it's just 5 defensive players, right? So
right.
It's very, very difficult to try to narrow this list down. I've got Micah Parsons as number 1, Nick Bosa, Chris Jones. I still have Aaron Donald here as a top 5, and then I've got Max Crosby as my 5th spot.
I'm glad you threw him in. I was about to have a heart attack. So number 1 is Aaron Donald. He is probably the best defensive player in the NFL history. He's just watching what that guy does. It's unbelievable. Number 2,
he's a freak. I mean, he is.
I mean, I caught on to it. So as being a Florida State fan, Jameis Winston's very first game ever was against Pitt. And all I heard about was how great Jameis was. I mean, he went like 18 of 20, like something crazy, like 12 straight completions as a redshirt freshman. But there was a player that stood out in that game, and it was Aaron Donald. He was ungodly. And he's not even he wasn't even that big. I'm like, how is this guy he literally is Jesus on the field. And then we've seen what he does in the NFL still. Like he's literally unstoppable. He's my clear number 1. TJ Watt at 2, Myles Garrett 3, Parsons 4, Nick Bosa 5.
Okay. All right. So yeah, I think overall these top 5 lists are fun to do. Not a lot of movement in most of these. You are getting me to sit here and regret not having Jamar Chase in my top 5, but I just don't know who. I mean, I guess if I have to replace him, I'd probably go with AJ Brown, and I'd probably put him up there with so it'd be Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, and Stephon Diggs. It was just really hard to try to narrow this down to 5.
Well, yeah, and once you get to that point, like even Diggs, there's a lot of similar players there, like you said. Like,
yeah,
to me, the difference in Amon-Ra St. Brown and Stephon Diggs is not much at all.
Different conversation for a different day.
Yeah. One's also a lot younger too, but
yeah, for sure, definitely. He's definitely winning in the name battle.
That's the sun god.
Amon-Ra is that's a pretty badass name. All right, let's move into rookie QB watch. So we've got 5 top rookie quarterbacks here, 3 of which seem to be pretty solidified in their starting spots, and that's Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. And then I've got 2 other guys here to note, in Will Levis and Hendon Hooker. So those first 3 guys in Young, Stroud, and Richardson, obviously those guys appear to be pretty solidified as starting quarterbacks on their individual teams. Young and Stroud are both definitely solidified. The same thing appears to be true with Richardson. Young and Stroud are both uber talented, proven quarterbacks that have a solid chance of being at a minimum serviceable QBs in this league for the next decade. Plus, there's a lot of questions around Richardson, which is why I threw up that red flag earlier. What he has in athleticism and leadership, he seems to kind of lack in experience and accuracy. So we'll see how that all plays out. Will Levis has shown some promise in training camp from the way it sounds so far. I don't think it's likely that he's going to unseat Ryan Tannehill anytime soon, but definitely worth watching as the season progresses. Hendon Hooker is an interesting one. Landed in Detroit, which I think is awesome. You guys just signed Teddy Bridgewater, which I think bodes really well for Hooker because he's going to have 2 really solid veteran quarterbacks to learn from on a team that seems like it just has tremendous chemistry. He has no pressure to step into a starting role right away, but I'm interested to see him. He's got good size on him, and I think he can translate really well into a very solid quarterback. Especially, I mean, watching Hard Knocks last year, man, it's really hard not to love what Coach Campbell's doing in Motor City right now. That guy makes me want to run through a brick wall every time I hear him talking to his players.
The wind beneath my wings.
He's
awesome.
Yeah, the guy is
man.
come on, man. So I'll be
Awesome.
I'll be excited to see what Hooker does once he gets healthy and has a chance to play. But those are obviously the primary guys that we're looking at here.
Yeah, I agree. Hendon Hooker is. I love the pick. I absolutely loved him at Tennessee. I do think it's great that he's going to get to sit there and basically have a redshirt year. He's coming off his ACL injury, so he's not needed to play. Like it's perfect. He's going to learn, rehab. Perfect situation for him, like you said. Other than the guys you named, the only other two names I'm going to throw out there, just because he was, I mean, what he did in college was kind of ridiculous, but Stetson Bennett with the Rams. Rams still truly, I mean, he probably is their number two just by default. Like, they don't really have a number two. Stafford, I mean, I love Stafford, but you never know injury-wise what's going to happen with him. I think that's one of the big questions of the year is, do we see Stetson Bennett on the field during the regular season? And I think it's above 50% chance.
You think so?
I mean, you just have to anticipate almost at some point a Stafford injury, I think. Like, I mean, I love him, but it's almost bound to happen. He's gone through hell.
Yeah.
And the only other player of note that I really made, another player I loved in college, was Jake Haener with the Saints. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think he'll probably win the number two battle with Jameis, but with Jameis, this is the last year of his contract. Jake will probably be the backup for Carr in the future, and I think that's another. He's undersized, but the dude plays kind of like Stetson Bennett, smaller guy, play with heart, straight winners. Like two fun guys to watch in the future. Hopefully, I can't wait for preseason games because the Saints will be with Jameis and Jake Haener. The Saints will be preseason must-see TV.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's always funny. A lot of people aren't all that excited about the preseason games, but I actually enjoy it because it gives you an opportunity, number one, to watch football after a while, but number two, you get to see a lot of guys like, who's that kid that played for Detroit as a linebacker last year?
Rodrigo.
Rodrigo, yeah.
Like, Malcolm Rodriguez.
Yeah, that's the kind of guy that you want to see during the preseason because he made a name for himself in doing what he was doing, and Hard Knocks helped that. But yeah, I love watching preseason NFL football because it gives us a chance to see guys that we typically would not see, and oftentimes you may see a guy that balls out in the preseason, doesn't make the 53, and then ends up somewhere else, and then ends up being serviceable. A lot of times it ends up being like a slot receiver or something like that. But yeah, it's fun to watch there. Yeah, so we'll see what happens with these quarterbacks. So we've got one more topic to cover today, and this is just a general question that I'll pose to you. Knowing what we know right now with everything in place, not considering any potential additional free agent moves, do you think the Chiefs are going to repeat?
Yeah, I mean, it's very tough to repeat in the NFL. We know that. Just because one of my good friends that I watch football with forever is a huge Chiefs fan, I've seen a lot of the Chiefs, probably more Chiefs than most, other than the last couple of years when they've been on national TV every week. But I watched him every week when it was Larry Johnson at running back, the Penn State dude. I mean, yeah. Sammy Parker. I've seen a lot of Chiefs football in my life. I have to say yes. Like if I'm betting on a team right now to win the championship, I'm taking the Chiefs.
Yeah, I agree with you. And that's not an easy division to come out of, and I think that actually helps them because they get tested a lot during the season, and they continue to do, like, Andy Reid, man, like,
it's awesome
what he does with that roster. There were so many people that were like, oh, the Chiefs are done. Tyreek Hill's out. They lost their number one receiver. There's no way this is going to happen again. And okay, we'll see. And you can consistently look at Patrick Mahomes and just shake your head at the shit that he does on a daily basis. You can see his background in baseball come out often when he plays with his off-balance sidearm throws and things like that. I don't know if you've had a chance to, I'm sure you have, watched the quarterback thing on Netflix.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff that he does in his workouts and stuff, man. It's hard not to like the guy. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and he plays with a lot of heart. So it's going to be an interesting year. I think if we're putting money down right now, for Chiefs to repeat, as difficult as it is. I'm with you on that. If there is going to be somebody that's going to come out and test them, I think it's going to be whoever comes out on top of the AFC East, because that's a gauntlet of a schedule. And whether it's the Bills, the Dolphins, or another one of the teams to come out of the AFC East, I can see them giving a run for their money. I don't really see anybody in the NFC side of the equation. Philly obviously is right now the shoe-in to represent the NFC. But the Chiefs have been there and they've played them and they know how to play them. So I don't think it's a situation where they go into it even with the fact that Philly's kind of reloaded even further than what they were last year. I still think that the Chiefs are going to go in there knowing that they're still the team to beat, and they play that way every time they step on the field. So,
yeah, the only interesting note with the Chiefs this year is they did lose Eric Bieniemy to Washington to go be the offensive coordinator there. Now, I don't think it's huge just because Matt Nagy's still there with them, and I mean Nagy was there before Bieniemy, and he left to go to the Bears to be the head coach, and that's kind of when Bieniemy came in. But with Reed and Nagy, is it something? Probably, yes, it's something. But with Reed and Nagy still there, I think it's just kind of an understory.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with you. All right, man. Well, that concludes our first episode of the Tuesday Night Touchdown Podcast NFL edition. We appreciate everybody that's listening. If you liked what you've heard and are interested in hearing some good feedback on some upcoming stuff that we've got going on with the NFL, and then more importantly, some betting lines and things like that as we move into the NFL season, please hit that like, share, and subscribe button. As again, always with me is Mr. Jacob Workman. My name is Reese Downing, and thank you guys for listening, and we'll get back with you guys next week.